So I just finished the Beartown Trilogy last week. Let's talk about it. So the Beartown Trilogy is written by Fredrik Backman, and if you haven't read Fredrik Backman yet, he is a heartbreaker. On purpose, he is the type of author that I would say explores the human condition by writing fictional stories, and I have no idea how much he takes from his own experiences. I would imagine that there is a moment that he sees, whether in public or in his own life. I don't know. I would love to talk to Fredrik Backman about this, but I feel like that he would probably witness a moment in life, in somebody's life, and then his brilliant mind expands into something like this beautiful heartbreak of what life kind of has the opportunity to be like in good and bad ways. These are upside down. Anyways, that's life sometimes, isn't it? So, obviously, Beartown is the first book. Then Us Against You and The Winners, which is the one that I just finished. This just came out on paperback this past Tuesday. It's currently Saturday. And so, but last Sunday, Matt took me to Barnes & Noble, and we picked it up early, just depending on the publisher. Sometimes Barnes & Noble has it early, so we got this because I have been, like, rechecking it out from the library and not reading it consistently, so finally bought it and finished it. But anyways, we'll start with Beartown. There are trigger warnings that you need to look up before you read this book. There is a bad thing that happens. I think that's how I heard about it going in. It's just called The Bad Thing. There is a bad thing that happens in this book. So when this bad thing happens, it envelops the entire town. So if you don't know anything about Beartown, Beartown is the name of the town where these books take place. And they are obsessed with hockey. And I've not been a hockey person ever in my life, unless you count watching the Mighty Ducks movies, which I loved watching growing up, but that was about it. That's my only experience with hockey. I think that we had like a street puck growing up with my brothers. I don't know if that counts as like hockey. It counts as West Texas hockey. But now, so backtrack to last year in my life, and I did get obsessed with watching NHL Dallas Stars hockey. Go Stars! I didn't realize it was this year. I thought it was last year. But in January, I read Beartown. So I read this whole trilogy this year. So in January, I read Beartown. It is a very sad book. This one specifically didn't make me cry. I have cried. I've cried in another Fredrik Backman book. This book made me cry. This one is sad, for sure, yes. But it didn't make me cry. So the Washington Times says, packed with wise insights in the human experience. So exactly like I said, it's like watching real life unfold, but in a book. And so like if you're watching your favorite TV drama, but it's a book and it's a series, it's just so good. So back to what this is about. This town is obsessed with hockey, and it's following a variety of characters. The chapters jump back and forth between parents and children, all within this town. It's not all parents and children. Some of these adults don't have kids, but obviously the kids all have an adult in their life of some sort. But it kind of looks into, if you've ever been sad about something in your life, if you've ever experienced a trauma, you will probably experience that again, unfortunately, in this trilogy, but not in a demeaning way, not in a way that feels like it's attacking you, but in a way that makes it feel like what you went through was real. It makes it feel like what you went through was something that you don't have to be alone with, even if it's just with these characters. And so I think that's why maybe I didn't cry during this book, but this one did get me in an area of grief, I would say, that made me go crawl back in bed with Matt in the morning before I left to work whenever I read that scene. And then this one did not make me cry. I did finish it when I was out in public, and so I was telling myself, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. At the end of this book, it's like almost a enjoyable, depressing series to read, I would say. I hate to love it because there's so much that goes on and bad. And I keep getting distracted about telling you what these books are about because I just want to talk about the emotions that are involved with reading these books and why it's so good even though there's so many bad things that happen. So, Beartown, the entire town is obsessed with hockey. If you don't love hockey, you're kind of like an outcast. No, I wouldn't say you're an outcast, but people that don't even like hockey go to the hockey games because that's where everybody is. So there's this tragic thing that kind of tears the town apart within itself, and it's mostly focused just exclusively on Beartown and how you can both love and hate where you live. You can both love and hate those that you are surrounded with daily, but it's the experiences that you have with those people, and then not only that, but what you choose to do with those experiences that either helps you grow as a part of a community and grows a community as a whole, or what you do with those experiences that tears you apart, that tears a town apart. If you've read this book, please let me know how your emotions were wrapped up in this. So you can read this as a standalone if you want to and be completely fine. But I will say that the second book in the trilogy was my favorite out of all three. And I think that's because it looks at the neighboring town a lot more closely. And I was calling the neighboring town Head. And then when I was reading the winners, I did listen to a little bit of the audiobook when I was like halfway through the book. And I think the audiobook narrator was calling the neighboring town Hed, which I think that Fredrik Backman is Swedish. So it would kind of make sense that that was happening. But for the sake of me being from West Texas and having read these books and calling it Hed the entire time until I was almost done with the trilogy, we're going to call it Hed. H-E-D. Us Against You focuses on the rival town, the rival hockey team of Beartown, and how Beartown is trying to almost get overcome this bad thing that happened in town from the first book, while while having this rivalry with the neighboring town for the next hockey season. And what does that mean to them to have rivals? And what does that mean when you're encountering those rivals, either in their town or in your town, or when the hockey game is happening and everybody from both towns are really just, they're all in the momentum of the hockey game, and the hate is just all in one building. And what does that look like? But then also, what does it look like as a part of these two communities having to almost like rely on each other, because there's a factory in one town that supplies a lot of jobs, and there is a hospital in the other town. I think the factory is in Beartown, the hospital is in Head, and they have two different hockey clubs, but they have to rely on each other because they have things that each other needs as neighboring communities. But for hockey, no way. Like, if you play for the opposite team, I hate your guts. But then there are, obviously there are some sad things that happen in this book because this one made me cry. But at the end of this book, it really shows how even when you could hate somebody's guts as a rival, if you grew up in a small town, in Texas especially, and you have a football rival, or whatever sport that you're playing, honestly, because this one's focusing on hockey. But then the end of this book beautifully shows that hating and loving are both passion. I would say being indifferent is not something that happens in this book. You either hate or you love, but both of those passions allow people to connect. Ugh, I don't want to spoil the end of this book for you. And then we go into the winners. And so even if you read these two, you can still conclude the series and never read this one and be completely fine. There's not necessarily like cliffhangers. I think that, I don't even know. I'm making this up in my head. If I was Fredrik Backman and I was writing these books and I wrote this one and it seemed like a standalone, I would have missed Beartown. I'm going to cry right now. Why am I getting emotional? I would have missed Beartown so much that I wanted to write this second book, Us Against You. And then still, after what happens at the end of that book, like, I can't leave this town. It has to conclude more fully with these characters. And so I think that's why The Winners is so big. It does, maybe, I wouldn't say it drags a little bit, but it's almost like if you're watching your favorite TV show and there's a series break and then you come back into a new season and it's not as punchy as it was in the previous season, but you can't look away, you can't stop because you love these characters and you love the town. That's what this is for the first 1/3 of the book, I would say. Once you get more into the book and then things kind of start unraveling, it's like I felt like I was watching a TV drama reading these books, and so that's why I felt like on this one I was like dying to figure out what was going to happen. So I flew through the second half of this book, whereas the first half of the book I think took me several months checking the book back out from the library on ebook on Libby. And then I don't know if having the physical book helped me in that in any way. The back of this one says, over the course of 2 weeks, everything in Beartown will change. I can't believe all of this happened in 2 weeks. Oh my gosh. This may be 3 years in a row, actually. But I felt like this one was set a couple years, like jumped into the future. No, it's not actually. And it might just be like 6 months or something like that. But they're pretty like consecutive in years. This might just be like, 6 months down the road, or maybe even if it was just like 1 year. These are pretty consecutive back to back in the flow of time. There's not like a big time jump, but the characters had matured so much in the Winners. I think that's why I thought that there are some of the kids that matured so much based upon what they experienced in the first 2 books that they had no choice but to mature. Ugh, and now I'm remembering what's happening at the end of this book. And I guess I didn't get to cry when I finished it because I didn't want to cry in public. Fredrik Backman, what the heck? The things that happen in these books are not okay, but they're real. Like, obviously what happens in these books are real, but the things that happen in real life, unfortunately. Now that I'm a big baby, Ellie's been sitting right here the entire time. Oh gosh, okay. I've decided to not do spoilers in this video because there's just too much, obviously, sadness to go on to talk about. There's so many different characters and the things that they're experiencing that I would have to read you all of the books, I feel like, to get into more detail of the plot. But I feel like I need to describe more because I got into a boohoo phase about what's happening at the end of this book. This follows, obviously, still a variety of characters in Beartown, but we get to experience some characters from Head as well, and what they are experiencing with the rivalry between the 2 towns that we really jump into a lot in this book. That, at first, I didn't like at the beginning because I was like, no, we are the bears from Beartown. Not Head. Why? We don't care about these people. After the end of this book, there is an undeniable intertwining of the towns, even if they still hate each other with hockey and other things, and just the way that they are brought up, that they can't deny that there is kind of a reliance on each other. And then in this book, there's an even more reliance after a big storm comes through at the beginning of the book. And then some of the kids from the first 2 books that have had no choice but to grow up fast are experiencing even more things in this book that are forcing them to grow up faster. There's just so much that happens in this book. Oh, perfectly. So if I had to sum up the trilogy, or this book specifically, The Winners by Fredrik Backman, the 3rd book in the Beartown trilogy, this is, you can see pretty far through the book. This is in chapter 96, page 584 of this book. But it says, it's a human right to be able to choose who you love, but it's also a human right to choose who you hate. That is the Beartown trilogy. But also, there's just so much grief wrapped up in these books. So if you're not ready to experience grief through the eyes of other people and these fictional characters in this fictional world, I would say don't read these. But I would suggest that maybe you read them sometime because, my goodness, it just makes you feel empathy for other people. And I am a huge empathizer already anyway, so this trilogy tore me apart. Let me know if you've read these also, and let me know if you're going to read them after everything that you've heard me say and all of my emotions that I've talked about in reading these. Like I said, the second one was my favorite out of all of them, and you can read the first one as a standalone. You can read this one and then stop, and then you can read these 2 and stop, or you can read all 3 of them. I will see you in the next video. But thank you for watching me cry like a baby and listening to me talk about these books. Oh, also, I feel like a crazy person after having that emotional reaction, but I rated all of these books 4 stars. And I don't feel right about that, if I'm being honest. Because I miss reading them already. So I might have to go back and change them all to 5 stars. I think at the time I gave them 4 stars because I've been in such a fantasy reading mood. And so when I'm not reading fantasy, I feel like I'm missing fantasy. And I feel like that made me think that I wasn't having a 5-star experience reading these books. Why am I a crazy person? 5-star trilogy.